Right. Haha, recording is in progress, folks. This is the most exciting episode ever. It's our 10th episode, and we get a special badge from Podbean to celebrate our momentous achievement. I like badges and free stuff. But anyway, so today we are joined by Irish Jon Hynes, and Jon John Willacy. Okay. So while other podcasts get boring people like A-grade Hollywood stars and famous politicians and tech bros, we've gone straight to the heart of awesomeness, and we've got some top kayakers on. So first, Jon Hynes, and he is currently running not one but two outdoor centres in Ireland, believe it or not. And not only is he doing that, he's also paddled around Ireland, which is a pretty cool thing to do, as well as done some pretty radical kayaking in places like Zimbabwe. And the Jon is Jon Willacy, who is the only person in the universe who's paddled around Great Britain not once but twice in the clockwise and anti-clockwise directions. And that was following a pretty awesome career in competitive kayaking back in the day, where he represented this country. It's pretty cool, and he is someone I respect, because he plans things in immense detail. And also on the innovation stakes, he's invented a whole new class of boat, which is specially suited for going around large countries and long distances, which pretty much everybody uses these days. So that was pretty cool, because sea kayaks have been around for a long time, and to produce a jump like that was quite special. So anyway, the reason we're here is because of Daryl. So I'm going to let Daryl do some talking. So talk, Daryl.
Talk. Oh my goodness. Right. So I'm not a kayaker, but I am an innovator. And so fascinated with a couple of things that I thought could be the focus for this issue. One is particularly if you're out on the sea and circumnavigating big land masses, grit and persistence. So behind me and in my library, I've probably read a couple of thousand innovating related books over the years, and they always tend to focus on what I think of as the exciting bits, the 1% inspiration versus the 99% perspiration. Nobody ever writes about, nobody ever talks about all the hard work that involves after you've made the plan and you're going to execute your project and create something. So I thought, okay, well, I've always been intrigued by Mike's persistence in saying, okay, I'm going to paddle around Ireland, for example. So it's the grit and the persistence that goes with that. So how do you stick with it? And then the other thing is, as an innovator, inventing new stuff. And it'd be great to talk, Jon with an H, about how you set about reinventing sea hiking. So either of those topics, I don't know where to start, Mike. Your call now.
Well, let's just talk shit for a bit. So Daryl wanted to do this episode, and I kind of put him off for a bit because I thought, what is the relevance of it? And then I kind of figured out that when you're paddling day in, day out, every time you launch and every time you land, you're solving problems, basically, because you've got this bloody great big heavy boat, and you've sometimes got some very unsuitable bits of land with rocks and goodness knows what, and waves crashing in, and you've got to get you and all your chattels in and out of that situation day after day after day without injury, because if you're injure yourself, the game is up. So that is problem solving in action. Just I never really kind of framed it in that way. So hand that over to you. Yeah.
Let me add one thing to that, Mike, because I think that very often what I see with inventors and innovators is they think there's a big problem at the beginning. So I've got this impossible challenge I need to solve, and I'm going to fix that. And once they've done it, they think, okay, now it's a nice gentle ride home to build, prototype, test it, commercialize it, etc. And they forget that whole idea of it's a continual series of problems, so literally a cascade of problems. And again, I think that's where the grit comes in, again, and the perspiration comes in. But yeah, constantly being able to adapt to circumstances, because I think again another parallel that I see between the innovators world and the kayakers world is that there's an awful lot of stuff which is outside your control, and yeah, you've got to deal with it. There's no choice, but you've got to deal with it.
So Irish John, tell us about your preparations for paddling around Ireland, say, and some of the obstacles you overcome on the way, and yeah, go for it.
So, yeah, good. It's great to see everybody here, and thanks for having me along. I'm going to maybe just gently push back at the start of this because
Yes,
I
good.
feel
Go for it.
I feel like I'm living on that Round Ireland story way too long at this stage, because there's a lot more to me than just that story. My success for Round Ireland actually goes way back in life. Childhood scouting experiences, climbing trees in rural Ireland, skating across frozen ponds, just having a very free, exciting, adventurous childhood, and lots of time in West Cork on the sea as a child. And then also being surrounded in my young adult life with very inspirational adventure characters who push me quite hard. I spent a lot of that time out of my comfort zone, but always in a supportive environment. So my whitewater kayaking career taught me some very straight lessons. If you're going to do it, you do it absolutely right, because if you don't, someone's going to get hurt or worse still. So, when I think back to my success for Round Ireland, and that's a good while ago now, it really was born out of those influences and experiences. So I was also a highly competitive mountain biker and marathon mountain bike racer for several years to good success. And, I lived a very kind of monastic life during that chapter, studying heart rate patterns, very clean diet, no alcohol, an ex-Olympian coaching me. And really, that taught me a lot of this is the key to, if you want to make something a success, you got to organize it. And also, if you take maybe the example of a mountain bike race, you slip a gear, the chain drops. Well, what are you going to do? Throw your bike in the ditch and go home crying? Or are you going to get the bike sorted, get back on it, and catch up those places that you've just lost, put the mistake away, deal with it? So that's translated very nicely to my career on the sea. And outside of all that, and I'll finish now, is I'm an outdoor educator. So I'm uniquely interested in people's connection with the nature and all that can bring, challenge or joy, people's ability to work together as a group, problem solve, etc. And finally, if you do those things consistently well, then you develop grit and resilience, and you can overcome anything without sounding cliched. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Love it. Thank you.
So,
sorry, Mike, you carry on.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I'm an occasional educator, and I don't know whether, John, you notice any generational differences in terms of that you're trying to instill in people that preparedness, that there's no compromises here. Do you find that people are either going to take to that, they're going to take those messages on board, or they're not, or is it something that you have to work towards and get yourself there? Is it great? Is it educatable in people?
I believe it is. Like I know our colleague here, John Willacy, this afternoon, like he's done the 10,000 hour rule probably 4 or 5 times over at
Yeah.
this stage. You just have to look at his achievements for round Anglesey records and to see that. But I think there's a lot of people in sea kayaking, and they're up, by and large, they're all extremely good people and kind and so excited for life. There's some people that like the idea of doing something, and then there's people that are really into it. And I think it's only when you have that first light bulb moment on the sea, this can hurt me unless I get it right. And when that
Like,
penny drops, that's actually the first day of the rest of your sea kayaking life. So some people never get that chance.
yeah.
And
As an
many
as
do.
an educator, can you help people get to that moment, that light bulb moment?
Oh yeah, and there's lots of good training systems out there. I'm involved in some, but there are many other great systems out there that are different to mine, and there's cultural nuances around the world depending on where you go. Um, and there is a degree where you can fast track it. I mean, you've only to look at, John's influence on how sea kayaking changed when the Tarn came about, and many people have tried to follow suit since, but never really kind of improved upon it. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely more accessible now than it has ever been because there's the best equipment, the best training systems, travel's easier. So I think people are now kind of scratching around looking for the last Everests or the last bastions of what sea
Mm.
kayaking limits are. It's kind of hard to find those now.
But I
It's,
remember you saying to me, John, that the kind of safety is very, very, very important, and it's especially important for you because you're in charge of all these young people, and society tends to look for victims or people to blame if anything goes wrong. So, that is a high stakes environment you're working in. But the thing is, the more we coddle people, uh, the less the less resilient they are. I think that's something that you've remarked on in the past.
Yeah, I mean, you can feed yourself with all sorts of negative influences. You only have to log onto your social media app or listen to the news, and that starts to create that conversation within the self. And I've worked with so many people that have various challenges in life, addiction, mental health, you name it. But all the research, and this goes back to the dawn of time. You spend time close to a campfire looking at a nice sunrise or a sunset, or work with people on a challenge outdoors, be it on a mountain or on the sea. You'll need moments of challenge, you'll need moments of success, moments of stillness, and moments of craziness. But if you can do that consistently, you can stay removed from all of those threats that you've just mentioned there. So yeah, I do agree with you a lot there, Mike. Um, it's just there seems to be so much negativity these days, and nature's the key if we want to be well.
So,
yeah.
so
John,
John, bringing you in, because I'm sitting here in awe of people like John, because I am the ultimate solo person. I just go out and do my own thing, and I somebody gives back to the community like that, and uh, inspires and motivates young people to go out on their own journeys. That is a totally awesome thing. So I think you've probably had your own coaching career, but certainly in my instance, and from many other people in the kayaking community. So John runs a website and keeps a track of records. You can find a list of people who've paddled around Ireland, and he comes up with exciting little challenges. There's one this year running for going around lighthouses. So I've been looking at maps, spying out lighthouses as I go around, and it changes the real world. You know his challenges were instrumental in building up my own confidence, and it's just one step after another. And it gets to the stage where suddenly doing something you never imagined you would do, you know, it just seems attainable. Whereas before it was like, oh, only superheroes do it. So, John, have a word in edgeways, mate.
I think you're spot on there, and that's, you know, you mentioned the website, the PSK website, the Performance CCAT website, and it's there for many reasons, but one of them, and a big part of it, is the inspiration and the motivation. And when we're looking for ideas, when I say it's we, it's myself and my partner Pascal, we think about the things that we like to do and the things we enjoy doing, but the things that also challenge us and at times perhaps we don't do. And we look at where we took inspiration and motivation in the past to do that, and we try and either focus that and pass it on to others, or maybe distill it or concentrate it a little bit for people. So the confidence is a big part of it, and what you say is exactly right. Anybody can achieve nowadays, in theory, anything they want, but you can't do it on day one. And that's the big thing that we struggle a little bit with the modern world, is that people watch a video on social media and they think we can do it tomorrow morning or this weekend. And it doesn't work like that. You've got to build up to it. Some of the things can be, as John hinted at earlier, can be dangerous or dodgy. Some are just challenging, and if you don't get it right, you're going to put yourself off before you get to the finish. But if you do break it down into smaller steps and you make each step enjoyable in its own right and progressive in its own right, you will get there in the end. And we've got a gentleman we're paddling with at the moment, and he wants to do some of the things that we've done. He's not been paddling too long, and at the moment we have a slight battle trying to make him understand that he's capable of doing exactly what he wants to do, but not by Saturday. It might take literally a couple of years to get there, but he can do it. And it's trying to slow him down is not the right phrase, but you know what I'm getting at. We need to make sure that he can progress. And John will know this. If you're trying to teach anybody to paddle, or let's say you want to teach somebody to drive a car, you don't just throw them the keys and say, you know, bring it back when you're finished. There's a lot more to it, isn't there? Riding a bike is the great example. Every child can ride, most children can ride a bike, but you don't just give them a bike and off they go. They'll start with the training bike or training wheels or whatever. They'll start with the parents holding the seat and guiding them, and then eventually they can take the first ride without any support, and then they can ride standing up, and then they can moves and wheelies and everything else that all, you know, young children get into. But you can't do that on day one. And I think that's what we all need to look at in anything we do, whether we're doing things in the sea kayaking world or anywhere else in life. It doesn't all happen on day one, does it?
Right. So are you a believer in the 10,000 hours? I've heard it, you know, the expression being used already this afternoon, but yeah, that idea of it's going to take you 10,000 hours to master a subject. Because I'm pretty certain, if I look at my experience, then yeah, I think there are a couple of things in life that I have mastered. I've mastered it in less than 10,000 hours, and yet there's other things where I've spent way more than 10,000 hours, and I can't say to myself, anyway, exactly, yeah, guitar playing, I'm absolutely no way mastered, you know, despite my 20,000 hours or so. But are you a believer? Is there something in the 10,000 hours, the Malcolm Gladwell thing?
Yeah, definitely. The 10,000 hours comes from the airline industry and the aircraft industry, so from the pilots originally, I think. Whether you throw a number on it, that's up to you. We laughingly joke amongst myself and some of my close friends that I've been on a thing we've called the lifelong paddling experiment. And I've gone through various levels of paddling. I've gone through lots of different disciplines of paddling and different boats. I've paddled Canadians and kayaks, and I've paddled different competitive disciplines, non-competitive, and all the rest of it. But they've all been working forwards. Everyone has always contributed to the next one and is always built on the past one. And I've now got to the level perhaps where I'm starting to perhaps not so much progress as I used to do, is maintain what I've got. But everything I've got is built on experience and on hours. And I do a lot of hours. And for that reason, now, there's a caveat to that, I think, or there's a qualifier to that some people don't have to do that. Some people are talented. Some people
fucking annoying.
Some people are just more perceptive, or they're, you know, we would call them the sport Billy or whatever at school, wouldn't we? There's some kids who could kick a ball and were good at every sport. And there's some that were complete biffs. And I was one of the biffs, no doubt about it. But I've built or achieved whatever I've achieved. And it's up to other people to decide what I've achieved, not me. But whatever achievements I have reached have all been done on hard work and basically on plan, review and analyze. and I've decided I'm going to do this. I work out the steps to get there. I then go and do it. I then review to myself, did I actually do it? And then what do I do to improve on it? And for example, we were training this morning, and I train mainly on white water when I'm in boat, tidal white water. And a lot of, or most of my training involves some sort of move. I have to get the boat from here to there, and it entails something that challenges me. So normally when it's a new move, we'll say, right, we'll start from here. That's my optimal start point. That's the place I want to get to. And this is the route or the features I'll have to use in the moving water to get there. I'll go and do it. Did it work? Sort of. What do I have to do to make it better? Right, we'll do this, this, and this. We've got to do it. And we do that until we've hit it and we nailed it. And then the important thing then is to go back to the start point and choose a different start point or a different route, a suboptimal one.
Okay.
Because now I've got the optimal one and I've nailed it to some extent. That might take years, but you know what I'm saying. But we go back and we work now from suboptimal, and that's a big part of the training. Is we push ourselves and say, this isn't where you would start from ideally, but this is how it's going to be when you go out there for real. And Michael know this, and John know this from the sea kayaking out in the sea. You'll have a really long day. You've paddled all day. You're really fed up. You've had enough. You're really tired. And as Mike hinted earlier, now the tricky part is the landing, and you'll guarantee everything you don't want to happen is going to happen in that next hour or next half hour, and you've got to deal with it. And my way of approaching that is to have dealt with that, or as much of that as I can in training in controlled environments. So when I hit it on the day, without any choice in the matter, I at least have something hidden away somewhere in my sort of back catalogue to say, you've been in a similar situation before, and this is what you should expect, and this is what you can do. And importantly, for me, I'm not a confident person, but I have a logical confidence. If I've done it before and I've achieved something before, I can do that again. Some people are just, I would call them genetic confidence. They can do anything they want because that's just who they are. For me, I have had to have worked up to it and have to have dealt with it. And that's where I think this development training comes in, to build that confidence and to build that knowledge. And I think in turn that eventually leads me towards the 10,000 hours maybe.
Yeah,
I really
that's
like
fascinating.
what you've said there, John. A couple of things kind of came to mind just listening to you there. I studied a whole range of outdoor education modules over the last while, and there was a quote I read from this chap called Lung. It was back in 1980, and it really made sense to me. And it goes something like this: what was once a cold, wet, miserable experience on the mountain can later be recalled as the most liberating moment of your life. So for people like us, what that says is it mightn't necessarily be pleasant in the moment. It could be a nasty surf landing at the end of a long day at sea. But if you've done that stuff before, you can kind of see through it. And okay, you get some dry clothes or you get some food later on, but it might only be next month or in a few months' time when that real sense of achievement comes. Not everything has a perfect sunrise. Not everything is easy paddling for the day in great company. So that's what we call delayed gratification. And I suppose that links back to what you guys are saying, that so many people these days are used to instant gratification. And in the adventure world, you've got to put the hard yards in. You've got to have develop that grit. And I like what John said there too, which links to Daryl's innovation piece. If you were to go out in one type of sea kayak on the same location and just practice, which some people think is the key to success, they'll only be able to do that in one mode. Whereas where we're coming from, open canoes, surf kayaks, whitewater kayaks, shore paddles, long paddles, wing paddles, Euro blades, you know, I could go on forward, backwards, reverse, eyes closed, different weather, different speeds. When you mix that variety piece in, then you can combat for any situation, I suspect.
Yeah, I think I'm really seeing that contrast with a lot of the people I work with who are purportedly innovators. And what I've heard is, I need to deliberately get myself outside my comfort zone, to go to that suboptimal position and just see how I work through that scenario. Which, I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Nassim Taleb and the whole idea of anti-fragile, but you seem to be right at the heart of anti-fragile there. So anti-fragile is the idea that the more stress I put on the system, the stronger I end up being as a result of that.
I think, from my point of view, I'm a bit of a monochrome guy, really, from my point of view. It's all about the canoeing. So, but an example there would be my training has all sorts of aspects, or it has four main aspects. It'll be the physical, the technical, the technique, and the psychological. And I have to work a priority of each one of those in a session. Some sessions will have a little bit of everything. Some will virtually touch one and hit the other side. But one of the sessions I do a lot is, or not a lot, that is important to me is a puffing time trial. It's just a basic time trial, a paddle from a place called Menard Bridge around the Puffin Island and back again. It takes 3 hours. It's against the tide. Invariably, the weather's never that much fun. And to be frank, it's an absolute naughty word. It's not nice to do. And by the end of it, I just want to cry for my mummy. I've had enough. There is a training aspect to it in the physicality of the 3 hours and so on. But I can do that in lots of other areas. But the puffing time trial is an absolute pain in the bum to do. And it's not really ever a nice thing. You never get off and say, I enjoyed that. You might get off and say, I'm glad I did it, but you never say enjoyed it. But the biggest reason for doing it is the psychological side, because I know if I can push myself through that, then pretty much anything else pales a little bit to it. And this is what John was saying. And we have to, from that point of view, step outside of comfort zone, most definitely, and I literally do in that session. And some people look at me and think, what's he doing that? It's a bit stupid thing to do. But I never regret doing it. Sometimes I don't like it, but I never regret doing it. And I think there's too many people, I think, that I come across who just think just because they want to do something, it'll happen, or they can make it happen. But you don't. You build on things to make it happen. You literally have to get the building blocks to build on that, I think. I think there's very few people have it built in to be experts on everything, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if I can push that a step further, because I look at a lot of athletes that I admire, and John, you were talking earlier about this idea of you get to a certain level, and then if you want to go beyond that, you're going to have to do something different. Now, so I'm thinking about people like Tiger Woods, for example, periodically reinventing his golf swing because he's realised that either my physiology's changed because I'm getting older, or if I want to hit the ball further, I'm going to have to change the swing in some way. And I think one of the reasons why I notice so many people are reluctant to make those kind of leaps is because there's going to be a period where things get worse before they get better again. And very few people I see are willing to go through that. It's going to get worse for a while. I don't want to go through that pain like you're puffing.
Yeah, and I think nowadays, men especially, let's be careful where I stray with this a little bit. None of us like to be, especially if you're good at something. If you have achieved a certain level in anything, you don't want to start at the bottom again, do you? And I even admit that to myself. It's hard to swallow your pride and go from being high up the chain to being down the bottom again. And we were just talking about this yesterday. We went for a little walk and we strolled into a half marathon running race. I used to do a little bit of running. I don't do so much now for knee problems or so, but we used to do running. When I was an elite racer, I used to do a lot of running races. And the big part of doing the running races was it stopped me getting too smart. It stopped me thinking I was too wonderful, because I went from being, top end elite running to being overtaken by the guy in the dinosaur suit and the lady walking her dog sort of thing. And sometimes you do need bringing down to earth a little bit, because then that makes you go back and look at what you do on your side and your sort of specialization and realize that it is built on thought and processes and planning and reviewing that, not just because of you and who you are as a person or genetically. You don't deserve to be the best just because you have a name. You deserve to be the best if you are the best for the work you put in. And I think sometimes you need to be brought down to earth a little bit. And I used to do the running races deliberately for that reason, to drag me back down to being overtaken by the man in the hippo suit,
Fantastic. I love that.
I think there's also just one point I'd like to make at this stage, because I'm just thinking of your listeners, if they're listening here to myself and John, who've done quite a lot of paddling. One thing that COVID kind of showed me was, everything is relative. So many new people came to paddle sports during COVID. Maybe they bought a sit-on-top kayak. Maybe they bought an inflatable stand-up paddleboard from, a supermarket. But they had their own adventures on a scaled basis for them as well. So think of someone, going out in a lake for the first time, the fear of capsizing, maybe wearing a spray deck. I've just as much respect for those people as I would within the peer group that John and I kind of circulate in as well. And it's really nice being able to facilitate those growth experiences for people. You know, I think what John is articulating there is the fulfillment that he gets from doing the sludge sessions up to Puffin Island. You mightn't get it there and then, but it all feeds into when he has a crack at round angles. He knows he's done his hard yards. There's nothing worse than going into an exam unprepared. He's done his homework. He should be okay, or thereabouts.
I think there's something I take away from that as well. You're very much right. I have done my homework, and then that gives me that confidence I spoke of earlier. My logical confidence as such. But what it also brings me is knowing where my limits are, and that's extremely important to me. I am not infallible. None of us are, but I definitely am not infallible. I know that. I have my problems. I am a fallible man, and I like to know where things. When I give up, I like to know when I get soft or I cry to myself. I like to know when my left shoulder gives out. I like to know when I'm really pushing my luck technically, because it's only when I reach those limits regularly in training, and I do meet them regularly, that I know I get the indicators that I'm coming close to them. And that's what at times keeps me out of making an arse of myself, to be blunt. And whether physically, technically, dangerously, or even socially, sometimes you just need to know that time to wind back a little bit. And you only get that from experience in it. And I think that's something that, like I say, I don't have this great confidence, and I'm jealous of and envious of people that have this great built-in confidence. But at times, I also like the fact that I know my limits are there because I've been there before. I'm not, like I say, I'm well aware that I have. Man,
I mean, as you both talk, I'm seeing this parallel with. I sometimes talk about Scott and Amundsen as South Pole explorers, for example, where Amundsen was the planner, and run all sorts of experiments of how broad a range of signal posts do we put to make sure that we're still on track with this thing. Whereas Scott was I think the classic British just bumble through, and the bulldog spirit will get us there. And
Boris.
well, that's I mean, now you've just taken a turn away for the words, haven't you? But I mean, I love those kind of paradoxes. But I'm just interested in your view of, is one of those things right, or is there a best of both of those worlds that says I need that bulldog spirit, but I also need to be the Amundsen that's got a plan?
But I think John probably comes across that more in his experience, because he'll see a lot more different people, and he will see both those kind of characters on a daily basis, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I use around that. Now, I'm still very early in my explorations of this, but I find transactional analysis very interesting for understanding character modes.
Okay.
Am I now in a childlike status?
What's transactional analysis? What's it?
Well, I suppose it kind of defines certain states of being. So, am I behaving in a childlike way? Am I a nurturing parent? Am I a controlling parent? Or am I behaving as an adult? But
so it's a dynamic thing as well. That's cool.
It's a form of psychology, and there are many other models. But then there's also maybe the 6 hats. So depending on any situation that you're in, if you've done the hard yards, as we've spoken about, you'll make a conscious decision. Right, this is happening now. I forecast this is going to happen, so I'm going to wear this hat to prevail right now. And I think that self-awareness that John checked us in with around, I know my limits and my radar is in tune. So if I'm moving towards that limit, I've got default actions that sort of prevent me tipping over the edge, because we all have families to go home to and people who care about us. None of us wants to go that step too far. So I think emotional intelligence is a huge part of success in the kind of activities we're involved in.
Yeah, I think, go back to Daryl's question there. I'm definitely a sort of a digital sort of guy, and I'm definitely a plan, review, analyze sort of guy, rather than just suck it and see. But you do come, obviously, like everyone else, I come across those characters, and at times I'm envious of those characters. On the longer trips that Mike has hinted at earlier on, the UK trips, a problem I had on a lot of them, I overthought things, and at times it held me back. Whereas I know through the website, I like to vicariously watch what other people do and how other people approach these trips. And at times, I'm quite jealous of people who just get on and do it and are successful with it. And you think, oh God, I wish I had a bit of that in me, But sometimes you've just got to live with what you were dealt, the cards you were dealt, weren't you? And I've got to make the most of those in a way. I've got to, my late 50s now, and I realise that there's things that are just never going to change. And the way I'm built, I've just got to make the most of what I've got. But you like I say, I watch people on things like the UK trips and stuff and the different approaches, and it is interesting to see that there are so many different approaches. And like John says, a lot of this would come from what he said there is emotional intelligence. That's not a phrase I could definitely use on myself, that's for sure. But you can see that different approaches do work. So you can't say that one's better than the other. We can give the numbers and all the rest of it and see who came out the best. But at the end of the day, they both can be successful, and importantly, they both can be unsuccessful as well. If you got a person who had a half and half or a little bit of each, I think you could do very well there with that.
Yeah, and I think that there's 2 points that come to mind there. Like if you look at John's website, PSK Performance Sea Kayak, and like, okay, there's some spectacular numbers there and some amazing people who really put that time in and a lot of investment even before that event day or that event expedition.
Right.
But anyone's who's on that list is special. Why?
Yeah.
Because they got out of bed and they had a go. So that's one of the things I really enjoy about paddle sports is that, okay, there is elite top end, but everyone is having a go in life. And just maybe a second piece of psychology I'll just share with you, because I learned an awful lot from this episode. When I used to mountain bike race, there was a guy in my category, and on the back of both his calves, he had two big lightning bolts tattooed to the back of his calves. And I always felt inferior to him for a long time, because when we'd be on big steep climbs, all I'd see was these two legs going up and down. And it used to psych me out. And it just galvanized me into better training, more, what do they call it? The sum of small parts, and that, just to find all those, little nuanced corner pieces of training that would add up to a bigger picture. And then it started staying with him for longer in the race was the first goal. Right. He'd still always beat me. But then finally one day, and this is where I used to do best in mountain bike racing, is I prayed for rain. I prayed for mud, because I knew I had him on those days. And it was still only 6th or 7th position, but to me, that was my Champions League. So
I love it. So that's my mental image for the evening, John. Those lightning bolts. It's...
Yeah. There you go.
Love it. Thanks for that. A great story. Can I move on a little bit and just talk about some of the invention stuff? So, John, the kayak that you've invented. I mean, am I sensing another paradox there of because maybe it's just my misconception, because I see a lot of innovators who think that their job in life is to make life easier for customers and for other people. Was that your intention with the new kayak design, or was there something deeper?
Good question. Well, first of all, the customer would be me. I selfishly did it for me. All right.
That's always the best kind of customer, right?
I think we have to go back to, John gave a quote earlier, and I'm not going to quote any great sort of academic here. I'm going to quote Grandma Willacy, and if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing properly.
Yeah.
And if you want a job doing properly, then it's usually best if you do it yourself. And I'd got to the stage where I had arrived on Anglesey. I'd had a career in racing and so on. I come from Anglesey. I'm living on an island. I came here with my work. I didn't have a lot of choice. I had to reinvent myself as a bit of a sea paddler. And the sea paddling is very nice, very interesting, very intriguing. But with my background, I wanted to push it a little bit more. And obviously, as Mike will know and John will know, part of my deal was sort of paddling around the island. It's 120 kilometers and it's a proper challenge, and if you get around, you've done well. So we went around the island. My time was pretty good. And I thought there's something in this. Now I can take my race experience and combine it with my now learning sea experience and bring the two together. But the thing that was holding me back, there wasn't a decent boat. I'd come from a racing world. I'd come from elite constructions, elite designs, and so on. And no offense to anybody, but the sea world was quite a long way behind. It was literally decades behind.
Right.
The word designs, I didn't create as such this design. I would say that there were already designs out there, but they just weren't. I paddled a couple of them in testing, and I wouldn't go back to them ever again. And I paddled one for a year or two, but it was never really right in my eyes. And I just couldn't find the boat I needed. I stumbled across a local manufacturer. He was forthcoming. We had a chat, and we said, "Well, why don't you design one?" I hadn't got a clue what to do, but I knew what made a boat go well and what didn't, and it just went from there, really. So it started out that I just wanted to go fast around this island, and nobody could provide me with the boat I wanted. So, as Grandma Willacy said, if you want it doing properly, do it yourself, and that's what we did. You know, and
Well,
I'd learned.
Yeah,
I knew about the boat designs. I knew what made a boat go fast. I knew how to go fast in water, how to go fast on water. And what I didn't know was how to get a boat shape out of a mold, because there's certain boat shapes you can plan on anything you want to make that boat go faster. But if you can't get the blooming thing out of a mold, you can't make it. So I had to learn the technicalities of that, and that's where a man called Mike Webb, he's the owner of Rockwood Kayaks, where he coached me in that. He said, "You can have that shape, but we'll never be able to make it." So I had to learn that sort of basic sort of thing. But once he put his knowledge of manufacturing with my knowledge of what makes a boat go fast, we came out with a reasonable design between us, I think.
Right.
Well,
So
I
do you
think
think
this
it?
is-
it
sorry, I
Sorry,
think it's a classic example of horizontal thinking, whereas you've got these silos of sea kayaking and whitewater racing and slalom racing, and John, both Johns have spanned all those categories. So they had the horizontal view of the whole. So when he alighted on one particular silo that had never been that focused on just going fast, he had all the knowledge there at hand to be able to make that breakthrough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big theme of ours. I mean, again, it's a problem I see when I'm working with companies to innovate. They're so specialized into vertical silos that all of the opportunities seem to fall down the cracks between the different disciplines. So very often the designer's got one idea, the manufacturer sees things differently. So I'm fascinated, John, by what you were saying about you can't get it out of the mold. And that kind of practical element of the designer thing.
I think on that horizontal, the silos that Mike mentions there, I think, put it in a little context there. I was in the Royal Air Force for many years, and I was doing my canoeing inside the Royal Air Force. And when you get to a certain standard in there, there's these big competitions between the four forces, the inter-services it was called, between the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, three forces rather. And once you get to a certain level in one discipline, they want you to win points for them in all the others. You're good enough that you can translate across a little bit from one team to the next, enough to get them points. You're better than the bottom guys, shall we say. So I ended up going for a specialist in the slalom originally. Then I got forced into wild water racing. I also was made to do flat water racing. You jump between the classes as well. You wasn't just a C1 paddler. I had to paddle kayak and so on. So that's a little bit where my background came from. I probably had a wider background than most people because I was literally forced into doing these things. And at the time, it was a pain in the bum. It got in the way of my training. I wasn't very happy about it. But now when I look back, or later on, I realized it gave me such a breadth of experience, which I wouldn't go as far as saying was unique, but it's very unusual to have that width of experience. And then when I brought that, or I dragged that with me into the sea kayaking world, it wasn't that I was superior to anybody else. I just had a different background that nobody else had had. The unique position. So that left it let me see a niche, and it also gave me the ability to perhaps do something with that niche as well.
Hey, Daryl, I just John Willacy here is so humble. He said himself and Mike have designed a reasonable kayak. So I just think maybe for people that are listening to this, if they're not into sea kayaking, let's just maybe put some perspective on that. Like, kayaking's been around for hundreds, thousands of years. Its roots go back into Inuit culture and so on. But that kayak most definitely was and is a game changer in our sport. It enabled a whole generation of us to think differently about what's possible, what a limit is. and I've paddled many great kayaks in many disciplines over the years, but I can honestly say there are days that are just rammed full of joy because of that kayak. But the question that I ask myself from time to time is, and I beg Mike, make me a double version of that, please, will you? But I think he needs a bigger workshop. But other manufacturers, and there's a lot of great manufacturers out there who make great sea kayaks, but they've tried to outdo that kayak or mimic it. And in my mind, not many of them have kind of succeeded yet. But what's next? You know, we're going to have another layer of innovation, or another kind of event horizon to do that. But as long as kayak history exists, that kayak will always be known as a defining moment in our performance history.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, on that, yeah, front of next generation. I mean, John, when you conceive the breakthroughs that have created that, did you see that as a pinnacle? Do you still see it as pinnacle, or is there a next game changer?
Well, it was definitely not a pinnacle, and it definitely isn't. There's definite flaws with that board. I won't say too much publicly, but put it like this: I am my problem in life, if there is a problem, it's a bit of a cliche, is that the sort of perfection side. Something has to be done properly, but from a business point of view, that doesn't always work, and that was again something I had to learn. I was a bit frustrated with Mike Webb at Rockpool when he was saying, we've got to get this boat out. He's got to earn money. And I said, well, it's not ready yet. And he said, well, it doesn't matter. Is it good enough? And I said, not as good as it should be. And that was an argument that came around a lot. Is it good enough? Well, no, it's not as good as it should be. No, I didn't ask you that. Is it good enough? And well, how do you define that? And well, Mike's saying, well, we've got to pay the debts. Well, not the debts, but pay the bills rather. Yeah. So the boat came out, and I was still thinking there's more development to be done. Whether there's a game changer coming, like John says, that's a big step, isn't it? It fell into a niche in a way because of this strange background I'd had, this unique background. And at about the same time, I wanted to push the record side of things, not super elite, but the record side of things. I thought there was people in the sea kayaking world that maybe would get a bit of a buzz out of pushing themselves a little bit more than just the usual trips. And so this all fell together a little bit. Now, I think if you look, without getting too specific in this, in the sea kayaking or the sea paddling world now, that the surf skis have come in, and they're the in thing at the moment. They're a different boat and they're used differently, but they're the fashionable thing, should we say. So to go to the next level, you have to have the right idea, the right boat, but you also have to have the right conditions and needs for it. And you have to have the right following from the people. The customers. We really pushed at the time, myself, my partner Pascal, and a few other people, to paddle that boat and publicize it and do things with it. And whether you would get that sort of same recognition now of that design if you came up with a new design, I'm not so sure, because the sort of customer base has been diluted with just progress. We're talking a dozen years later on than when that boat first arrived. I've definitely got ideas. I haven't got a workshop big enough to do them. And at the moment, Mike's busy doing his own things and earning thousands or millions of pounds. So whether I would get it done before I get too old or literally we publicized that boat by paddling it. Well, I'm a dozen years older than I was then to paddle it. Can I do the same things to get the recognition it would need as a new design? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that innovation is one of the cruelest games on the planet. You can get, you need to do 100 things to get from your idea to, there it is, in the store being bought by people. And if you get any one of those things wrong, so if you haven't got the eye of the public, for example, a particularly frustrating one, then your 99 perfectly executed things count for nothing. So I think that really fits in with your planning earlier. Sorry, John.
I know where one of our next big innovation things needs to be, and that's the materials that we use to make our sport happen. We obviously, without sounding too cliched, we've all got a part to play making our sport, I suppose, more environmentally conscious and sustainable. And a lot of my studies have revolved around that. But if we could crack that one, you know, the initial price to pay, well, that is, if someone wants a performance kayak, well, you may have to pay more for it in order to have that privilege of it being a cleaner kayak, or a, you know, a more environmentally friendly made dry suit or whatever. So that's definitely the piece that I hope the innovators within our sport could address for us. And I know they are. There are certainly a lot of the clothing companies are looking and working really intensely to try and address that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And the whole composite, the whole fiberglass world as such, you know, if you use that word, there's a lot of unpleasant materials that are going to become under scrutiny soon, I think. But unfortunately, the sea kayaking is quite a niche sort of area, really. You know, for those who live in that world, it might be all we have, but it's never going to bring in the major profits that major corporations are going to request or require, and therefore it's not going to bring in the same R&D and the same level of R&D. It is still a cottage industry in the UK to some extent. So I think John's definitely right there, but whether anybody's going to back that, I think we'll tend to have the cast-offs of other industries. So things like composites especially are going to have come, the composites we use nowadays will have come basically from the aerospace industry.
Aerospace, yeah, right.
Once they get their act together and decide they need to. The trouble with aeroplanes is that you don't tend to, or trouble with canoes is that we don't tend to sort of wreck them or recycle them as often. We make them last, whereas, you know, aircraft should definitely have got a specified lifetime, don't they? You know.
Well, I think living in Cornwall, you've got they're called RIAs, which are the big estuaries that have flooded back when the last ice age finished, and you go down some of them and they're just full of abandoned yachts. It's just because people retire, buy a yacht, sail it twice, and then they die and it's left to rot there, and it costs tens of thousands of pounds to get. And the other place that this composite disposal is a big problem is wind turbines.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of them around, and they're big things, and they've got a lifespan just the same as aircraft. So, but you know, it's again, it's the solution will be out there, and you know, John's totally right. It's unlikely to come from the kayaking industry because they don't have billions of pounds to spend.
Yeah, I mean, that's our business is a tiny business, so yeah, we've got to use our time and our money wisely, and so but our start point is someone somewhere solved your problem. So work out what the problem is, and then go and look for somebody who's done some hard work for you. So think of somebody with a more extreme version of your problem. They've done that hard work probably. So I think that parallel, John, you make with aerospace industry and the composites, you've got to get the composite right on an aircraft, otherwise you're going to kill people. But now that can deploy that capability in another industry. But I think the whole thing for me starts with a customer frustration. If there is no customer frustration, then you can be inventing the best solutions in the world, but nobody's going to go out and buy it. Yeah. So what are those frustrations, would you say, right now in and around the kayaking world? I mean, John, in Ireland, you mentioned sustainability as a frustration for people and something that they care about. But is that something that's going to drive this cottage industry, to innovate?
Yeah, I think I'll maybe speak maybe on the kind of maybe the more personal side of things. I think people are craving disconnection from the busyness of their lives. So it's a lot of the people I work with use sea kayaking as a means to enhance or to drive their well-being. So nature connection, getting away from it all. But then I suppose you'll have people as well. I mean, I'm working with one person at the moment. They showed me their calendar of sea kayaking for the year. I was blown away by how much is in it. I want to do this. I want to do that. They're chasing. They're on the way to their 10,000 hours. So I just think everybody's different there. Just listening to John's sessions, the Puffin Island session. It's time out, isn't it? it's connection to nature, it's seeking fulfillment. And I suppose the final thing that just sort of came to mind there, maybe I haven't really answered your question there, Daryl, but last year I kind of did a trip just to put two fingers up to things a little bit, I suppose. Mike, when he was passing through, would have heard me talking about it. So I went and found a battered old Nordcap that had been given to me by a friend, and I renovated it. And I purposely went out and found equipment from way back in the 80s. And I went off for 4 days and just immersed in a locations close by to me here, no other people, and just used a heavy old canvas tent with aluminium poles, a big heavy paddle with right angle feather on it, basic stove system, basic food, no phone, no PLB, no VHF, no nothing, just me and nature. And I made more mistakes in that 4 days, despite all my experiences. But it was hugely satisfying. So what I took from it was,
nice.
it's great to have all of the innovation, but sometimes there's no harm to go in and ground yourself a little bit as well. And that helped me put myself in my students' shoes. I was able to walk in their shoes for a few days ago. You know, what is it like to feel intimidated or on the back foot or to make mistakes? So I'm rambling now. I'll
No,
go
no,
quiet.
I love that point, because again, the reason I say the whole thing starts from frustration from customer. If there is no frustration, I mean, I work with several industries, particularly the stuff that you go and buy in supermarkets, and you talk to consumers and they say, well, I'm perfectly happy with the current shampoo, so don't bother designing a new one for me because everything's great. And I think in many ways, some industries just overserve the customer and have just made life too easy for people. And I think then you start down this other road of just making the species into a species of weaklings. The exact opposite of what we were saying earlier about anti-fragile.
Right, so just I was thinking about the next stage in the evolution of kayak. If you take Irish John's point that the goal is not to sea kayak, the goal is to go out on the water in nature. You could say the next innovation has already hit us, and that would be inflatable paddleboards, because they've absolutely revolutionized access to water for probably 100 times as many people. Because it's quite funny. Sometimes I'm out on my own and I'm going around a scary headland, but it's good weather, and I go around the corner and there's 10 people in paddleboards in bikinis. I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm not so heroic after all.
I think
So it's very easy to kind of steer at them, because they're nowhere near as capable as a sea kayak. A sea kayak can literally go anywhere, the same as a yacht, and can go to places that yachts can't. Whereas you don't want to be caught out on a paddleboard when the wind's the wrong direction or it's too wavy. But still, you've got to give it credit, because it really has opened out the water, which I'd much rather have to myself to a lot of other people.
Yeah,
So,
I think you
sorry,
might.
Don. Yeah.
Sorry, I think that's exactly where I was probably looking at. Where if Daryl asked for innovation, or where innovation would go in this sport, and I think the crafts themselves are quite limited from the point of view they're human powered. So we don't have as a whole sales, whatever. So they're also limited by air drag and water drag. Water drag's quite limiting. We make waves and so on. So there becomes a point where we can't really make them go much faster. We've also already got to a point where they're relatively easy and user friendly. So we're getting to a point where what do we look for next? And obviously, cost is to keep the cost down, or to make them more manhandleable as such off the water. So I think that's exactly where you are with the SUPs. The SUPs didn't exist before because you basically couldn't fold them up and put them inside of a boot of a car. And now you can, and everybody can have a SUP, and they can have a SUP where stand-up paddleboard, sorry, when I say SUP, where they can buy it to use it 3 or 4 times a year on the lake in the summer, and it doesn't clutter up the garden, doesn't clutter up the garage,
Yeah.
a bag. They don't need to buy a roof rack and all the extra kit. They can literally have it in a bag. They pull it out, they pump it up, and away they go. And inflatable kayaks have never been all that successful up to now. Not at definitely the higher end of the sport, but maybe the technology, and there is some extremely interesting technology in the SUPs, how rigid they can get these boards. Is that a future in sea kayaks where we can end up with a boat that is relatively cheap, mass produced, relatively light, and easily transportable and easily transferable to the water? Is that the future?
I'd like to highlight inclusion here as well. Like I'm just listening to you all there. I'm minded of the e-bike conversation in mountain biking.
Oh yeah.
So when e-mountain bikes started showing up, you'd have people going, that's cheating.
Yes, exactly.
But I know a couple of people, they're slightly older, maybe they're carrying a bit of weight, but that gets them out into the mountains and they have a great day out and they come home feeling better, like they've taken part in a sport. So I would also liken that to some people when they see my sea kayak with a sail in it, they go, oh, that's cheating. And my response is, hop in and try it. And 10 minutes later, they come back, oh, now I see what you're talking about. So, if you just look at what's happened, kite surfing, it's completely changed as a sport because of the innovation of foils that drove wing foiling. And that's just evolving at an insane pace at the moment. So all of these sports talk to each other around innovation and look what they're doing over there. How can we translate that to our craft or our equipment? So that's the bit that I enjoy a lot in our sector, is that we get a lot of people with disability out on the water because of innovation and equipment as well. Double sea kayaks, wheelchair accessible power boats, outriggers. So not everything has to be at the top end, high end of performance as well. It could just make it more appealing to a wider audience.
Well, with any sport, you only have a top end if you have a foundation to build it on. So you have to bring people in at all levels, or else you don't have a sport, you don't have an industry, and you don't have the enjoyment and the fun with it, but you also don't have the finances. People aren't going to pay for the elite end of a sport if nobody's put in the bottom end work and brought the people in.
So you're so right, John. You're so right.
All levels, there's no doubt about that. And all levels just are as worthy as any other. It isn't all about the elite stuff at all.
Yeah, I think one of our themes is and Mike mentioned earlier, this idea of horizontal wisdom. It's none of these is any better or any worse than the other ones. I think, but you also need that pioneer. So we get occasionally to work with Formula One in the automotive industry, for example, and the theory has always been that you'll pioneer performance, pushing technologies there that will eventually cascade their way down into the mainstream. And I think it's also one of those industries these days where it becomes progressively difficult to translate those ideas from Formula One into the rest of the industry, because everybody's so optimized on doing things their current way. It's you bring along a new idea and it's almost like you just brought somebody a big problem they don't want to have to deal with, rather than seeing it as an opportunity to make fuel consumption better, for example, or performance of the vehicle, the dynamics of the vehicle to get better.
I think,
sorry, go on, Mike.
One of the crossovers between something like Formula One and all kind of adventure sports is that it's more than a job. It tends to attract enthusiasts that kind of live the thing, and I think that those levels of motivation, I think that just making up on the spot are key to innovation, because if you're living and dreaming and I think 24/7, it's a hell of
that's
a problem.
exactly it.
Yeah,
the sort of passionate enthusiast has the idea in the shower, whereas the employee might have the idea in front of a CAD system or whatever if he's been told to, but it'll never be quite as that. You know what I mean? It's that Archimedes moment, isn't it? In the shower, eureka, why don't we do this? And those things just happen. They're hard to force at times, I think. We can analyze and plan and all the rest of it, but at times that little mode of inspiration comes from the enthusiast, I think, and somebody who is basically obsessed about what they're doing.
I think you're onto something there. I'm going to use the comparison to Premiership footballers. Like, how many players are out there on £250,000 a week, but they're never going to win a Champions League. But there are some players out there that are on 50 grand a week, and they might win one Champions League, but their name will never be forgotten. And that's because they were passionate and they drove that extra bit. So I think John's onto something there. And likewise, Mike, I didn't choose this career to make millions. I chose it because I believe in it, and I'm surrounded by good people when I'm in it. So unless you've got a sense of personal value or a sense of fulfillment, what are you doing?
I can see that when I look at those people I see around me in the innovation world that are successful, sustainably successful. I think the first thing I notice is they've got skin in the game, so they care. And I'd take that a step further. They've actually got soul in the game. So this really means something. My life meaning is determined by this sport, this domain that I'm operating in. And I think a lot of professionals don't have the skin in the game, and they certainly don't have the soul in the game.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
So Daryl, or anybody, is there any other? I've got one other topic I could introduce. Anyone else want to pull something in?
Yeah, I'm just going to roll a little grenade across the floor here now.
Oh yeah, we love grenades.
I like grenades. Yes.
So, I'm doing this master's in outdoor education, sustainability, and well-being at the moment, and I've done a lot of introspection over the last year. And I suppose in my community, a lot of people know, oh, Jon Hynes, he's involved in training sea kayaks. He does lots of training courses, lots of assessments, and even though that's been the backbone of my working life, it's actually something that I've begun to kind of, I won't say struggle with, but definitely kind of analyze and try grow beyond that. Sea kayaking is not about training and assessments and certificates. Are you level this or you level that, or have you got your 10-star or whatever it is? Those are just necessary building blocks to go off and enjoy the sport. So certainly, I'm just speaking personally here now. I'd be curious to hear John's thoughts on training and assessment. They're just a means to an end for us. So I just think there's a big industry around training and assessment. Well, in our world, relatively big industry, but we shouldn't lose sight of the very essence of the sport, which is go out, enjoy an adventure, and come back feeling better, and don't harm anyone in the process.
What's your thoughts on that, John?
My thoughts on that. Oh, I have to be very, very careful what I say.
Hey, there's the grenade.
I could sense the pins out. The pins out.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Great.
You have to. I live on Anglesey in North Wales, and Anglesey is a centre, not the centre, a centre of UK sea kayak coaching, and it is very much based on assessments and qualifications, as John says there. I assess myself every single day. In fact, I assess myself many times a day. But the difference is I do it and I do something about it, and it's only for me. I don't need to display my assessment to anybody else. And the only reason I assess myself so many times each day is to know how to make myself a better paddler. And that's what my life's always been. And the reason why I want to be a better paddler, because I want to be happier in what I do. I want to be safer in what I do. I want to have more adventures. I don't really give a monkey's what anybody else thinks about what I do. So that's why I want to do it.
Amen to that. I mean, again, I can see a parallel with the industry world where there are, again, certifications, ISO standards, and I think a lot of companies just treat it as badge collecting. But it doesn't affect the business. And I think I love your point, John. About it's only important as far as me getting better and me being able to go on more adventures. The ultimate outcome in many ways.
I'll throw a little hand grenade in, if I may.
Oh yeah,
do it.
Double hand grenade.
Before you do, John, can I just make one clarification, because I'm conscious this podcast is going to go into the hands of a lot of very dedicated paddlers who have worked tirelessly to create and be innovative around training systems. So I think John comes from one of those hotspots where there's a lot of great innovation. And yeah, there's a bit of rivalry as well. So just I'm not being dismissive of trainers or people that I work in that sector, and I really enjoy the company of people who work within it. But at the same time, what I'm saying is we shouldn't lose sight of the essence of the sport. So anyway,
Well, to
back to your
put
grenade,
it in
John.
a nutshell, when you learn to drive a car, you don't do it to pass the bloody test. You do it so you can drive a car around.
Well, if you do,
Exactly.
you only
Is it
pass the
right?
test once. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my sort of hand grenade would be this constant innovation sort of thing, you know, and
Mm.
bearing in mind my point, my whole ethos of my paddling life, and arguably, you know, it goes beyond just my paddling life, is to constantly get better.
Yeah.
I just want to be the better paddler, just for me, no one else. I don't want to demonstrate to anyone else. I just want to be the better paddler. And as I get older, by trying to be a better paddler, I stay as good as I can be at the age I'm getting, shall we say.
Yeah.
However, I am also a little bit reticent on the. Oh, am I still there? Seem to have
We
faded.
can still
Yeah,
hear you,
yeah,
John. Yeah,
yeah.
your image is
It's still
frozen, but we
here,
can still
don't
hear you.
worry.
Constant innovation. I look around and I see some people innovating all the time, taking the latest fashion, the latest fad, and so on. And
Yeah.
sometimes that leads you down dead ends, or it wastes time. And where do we draw the line between constant innovation for constant improvement, or wasting our time and just trying to improve or be better in the areas we're good at? So a big part of
Mm.
my training is just to take what I've got and just sharpen it and make it better and better. But I'm wary if I do only ever do that, I become a monochrome paddler. I need that more experience. But by trying to get more experience and trying to innovate in new areas and into new sidelines as such, that can lead me down dead ends and waste time that I could be using to improve what I've already
Mm.
got. Where do I draw the line? Which way do I go? Anyone would like to answer that one?
Blimey.
What's with you, Daryl?
That's, well, as you're talking, I'm thinking I very often use a story of from athletics and high jump, and so hopefully I'd buy into the idea of you've got continuous improvement, so we're just making those incremental gains, and then eventually you get stuck. So you look at the world record for the high jump. I think for women, the record is held since the 1980s, and for men it's held since the 1993. The last break of the record was. That says to me that you've now got a sector, a sport where people have optimized the system. They've gone as far as the system will possibly go. And until somebody like Nick Fosbury comes along and reinvents and finds a different way of getting over the bar, then the whole sector is going to be stuck. And so I think we've all got, what I always say to my clients is we've all got that choice in life. You can either be the incremental improvement person and eventually recognize that you are going to hit those fundamental limits where no matter what you do now, things aren't going to get better, and that's okay. Or you the Dick Fosbury person, the person who comes along and says, no, I want to win my gold medal, and I know I'm not going to be able to do it by incrementally improving what other people are doing. I'm just going to have to find a different way of doing things because my physiology is different, and I'm determined. I'm going to have to find a new way of doing things, and I think those either-or choices. Yeah, to me, the answer is never this one or this one. It's a case of I want the best of both of those worlds, ideally. So I need to be doing the incremental improvement stuff, but I think I also need to be cognizant of the fact that eventually I'm not going to be able to improve anymore just because the physics says it's not going to get any better than this. You're going to have to now find something different if you're going to keep on improving. I don't know.
And
Does that resonate
yeah,
with your
does that
experience?
translate into business then? Is that what?
I think it does. I think in business, it's very often expressed as S curves. So you can improve, but you're eventually going to get stuck. I think the challenge that I see in business that I don't see in sport, although having said that, the reason I use the high jump story is that, if I'm a high jumper and I think the world record's not changed since 1993, I should probably try and find a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
Now, and I think industry kind of is so stuck in that continuous improvement way of looking at the world that they don't recognize things hit fundamental limits either. So a lot of my engagements with companies, they've been doing the continuous improvement stuff for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years in some cases. everybody's really frustrated because they put all this effort in and nothing beneficial seems to come back again. And I'm the person that usually is the one giving them the difficult message that says, well, yeah, you're at the top of the curve now. Your only way forward is to jump to something different. And my question to you earlier about, that idea when you've made those jumps, things get worse before they get better. That's the biggest challenge, I think, in companies, because nobody in companies likes going backwards.
But if we look, as a pure punter, as a customer, I'll turn the television on every night and I'll see that the latest washing machine detergent has got better, hasn't it? But we're not washing our clothes any differently than what we were when I was a child.
Yes,
it's very liquid, wasn't it? We've got whatever it does now. It cleans at 30 degrees and blah blah blah. But nothing's changed fundamentally. It's just
I agree.
over the last years, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that those are the industries where that is there a customer frustration there. The realistic answer is to the point you just exactly made when you look at those TV adverts is there is no frustration. My detergent's always worked. I don't particularly care about a better one.
It's just a marketing exercise to sell.
It's a market exactly. It's a marketing exercise. Yeah, no frustration, no innovation opportunity. I mean, it's as simple as that. But it's if your salary is based on I'm here to innovate, and you hear those words, then I'm not going to be popular when I tell you those words.
Listening to you all there, and just going to circle back to something that John mentioned earlier on. Like if you look at the icons in the sport, or the heroes, or the high achievers, like how do boundaries change? Like we need people to be brave, to be daring, to be bold, to think differently. And like if you look back there in our sport, I think it was 2017, you'd Ollie Hicks and George Bullard, somebody said, oh, they're going to paddle from Southeast Greenland back to Scotland. What? How are they going to do that? But they'd figured out a system that eventually worked for them. Now they had some big challenges and frights along the way, but it worked, and it broke an Everest-like boundary in our sport. We've had people that have paddled across the Atlantic. Alexander Doba did it on 3 different routes, and very innovative type boat. So when we have people like that giving slideshows, or Red Bull Media, or whatever the case may be, that creates that base layer of sit on top kayakers that will buy enough to feed up into that, albeit accidental or conscious innovation points in the sport. So I deem we're in a good place. There's lots of exciting things happening.
So it is an act of imagination, really, because you've got to imagine doing things that generations of people before just never thought was possible, and that is a hell of a leap, really.
And I think on that one, you've also got to look. You also need to look at a generation of people now who don't think it's possible. And that's where I try and fit in a little bit on some of the challenges we set on our little website, is just to make people look at what they do today from a slightly different point of view. Why do you always do the same trip? Why have you never gone around the other side of that island? Go and paddle around and have a look. You don't know what you'll find there, and you don't know what you'll learn by doing it. It's a minor version of the sort of research for the sake of research, isn't there? Just go out and do it and see what happens. You might find that you wasted your afternoon, or you might find you learned something completely new that you never even considered before, and then you might be able to do something with that. We don't have to inspire the people in front of us. We can inspire the people sat next to us as well, I think.
Yeah, amen to that.
Okay, I think that brings us to a really good point to wrap up this episode. So John was talking about going running, and the guy in the dinosaur suit bringing humility. So the one thing that this episode has brought me is I need it more than most people, is a whole heap of humility, because I'm just gobsmacked at the I call them the philosophers of the kayak world, and that they have really shone today, and hence I've been unusually quiet. because he's more on your level than I am.
I was about to say that this has been the best podcast, and I think maybe it's because you've been quiet, Mike. I don't know, but
Well, bear in mind, Daryl, it's only your 10th podcast. Let's see if you're saying that when you've 100 done.
True.
So-
I think for me, it's because I've been outside my comfort zone. But gents, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and getting an insight into a world which is very different to mine. But actually, I now see is completely parallel, and it's the same world, right? It's the same world. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Say goodbye, guys, and
Thanks.
thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real honour for me to mix with the likes of you, my superheroes.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you very much,
guys.
Thank you
And
very much. I've enjoyed it.
yeah, really
Right,
enjoyed
cheers,
listening
guys.
to you.
Yeah,
Thanks, John.
we'll
Thanks, John.
have to
Thanks,
get
Mike.
back on another time. Yeah.
Cheers.
Please, God, take care.
Cheers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Yeah.